All right, I've got a question for you. Have you ever hired someone who looked amazing on paper, had a great resume, great interview, great references, and then 60 days later, you were wondering what happened? Or on the flip side, have you ever hired someone who wasn't necessarily the most impressive candidate, but 6 months later, you couldn't imagine your business without them? Well, I've seen both. Over the last few years, through GoStaffy, we've placed over 300 plus team members into digital marketing agencies and businesses across the country. We've placed executive assistants, media buyers, project managers, web designers, marketing assistants, and many roles. And after watching some become indispensable and others flame out, I've noticed a pattern. The best team members don't necessarily have the best resumes. They have something else. Today, I want to share the 4 traits I've seen over and over again in the people who become rock stars. And I want to take you back when I first hired my first virtual assistant or team member. And I remember I didn't know how to hire, literally. And this was many years ago. When I hired this person, clearly it was not a good hire because I wasn't looking for the right things in the hire. I was only looking at the expertise, the soft skills, but I wasn't looking at other areas that were important. And what happened was that the hire only lasted 2 months. But then on the flip side, when I hired my third hire, that person was actually the rock star I needed to grow the company, to grow the agency. Because that hire had one thing that the other hire didn't have, and that was character. You see, the difference between a great team member and an average one isn't always talent, right? It's usually behavior. It's usually the character. Now, yes, that person still needs to have good talent. It's not like you're going to hire somebody that has a great attitude, great behavior, but then doesn't have no talent. But what you want to do is hire for character first and then make sure he has the talent. And after 300 plus placements, I stopped looking at resumes and started looking for patterns. And that's what I'm going to talk today. I'm going to talk about 4 traits, and maybe I'll add a 5th trait in there as well. But I'm going to talk about 4 traits that I've seen that will help you place the right team members in your agency. So trait number 1 is you want to make sure that they over communicate. That communication is key. The best team members over communicate. If I could only test for one thing during a hiring process, communication would probably be at the top of the list. I can share numerous times where when I would hire a great team member, that team member would always over communicate. They wouldn't wait for me to tell them what to do, right? They would send me the end of day report. They would send me options on what should be done. If I gave them any type of training, let's say they finished the training, they would even look for more training, right? They were just one step ahead and they would over communicate. And I think those are good signs that you have a rock star. The other one is as well, if you see other people talking good about that team member, right? Especially your leadership team or the agency owner, if they're giving you feedback that this person is a rock star because of communication, then that's a good sign, right? And I believe on the flip side that if you have poor communication, it's going to destroy trust, right? Because especially in the first 3 to 6 months, the team member needs to communicate, needs to over communicate. So you want to make sure that when you're looking for the right hires is that you notice that they know how to communicate and they're not afraid to over communicate. Think about your best team members right now. How much time, let's be honest, how much time do you spend chasing them down for updates, being on top of them, right? It should be the other way around, right? They shouldn't go silent on you. They should be sending you information. They should be sending you what they're doing, right? With the end of day report. Great team members communicate before you ask. So trait number 2 is accountability. The best team members will own it. And I can share a personal story. I remember there was a major issue on an onboarding that we did, right? I thought that part of the reason why we didn't have a good onboarding was because I did not train the person the right way. And I was going to take blame on it. But I remember this team member stood up and said, "Hey, I'm taking ownership. The reason why this did not go where it's supposed to be going, the reason why the client had a bad onboarding is because of my fault. I did not create the right SOPs to follow, and that's why it happened." So I remember that story, and I remember clearly that that person, even though it wasn't completely his fault, he took ownership of 100%. So I think if someone is taking ownership 100% of the time, even though they're only 40% guilty or 50% guilty, that's a good sign of a team member that really takes ownership of it. Because when you take ownership and you don't take excuses, then they're going to learn and they're going to be able to grow from it, right? So the people who grow the fastest aren't the people who avoid mistakes. They're the people who take ownership. And I believe every agency owner can forgive a mistake, but very few can forgive excuses. I mean, let's think about all the hires you've had in the past few years. Don't you hate when a team member always has excuses and doesn't take ownership for most of the actions needed, right? You're looking for those team members that really take ownership of it. Trait number 3 is coachability. Feedback is fuel. When I look at a team member, they fall into 2 categories. They fall into a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And I've noticed that top performers are incredibly coachable because they don't see feedback as criticism. They see it as an opportunity, right? And I'm sure you've had that story where you're speaking to a team member, or maybe you have to correct a team member for something that happened, and you're just speaking normal to that person. You're not being rude, and then all of a sudden they take it personal. Or you're seeing most of the time when you're giving direction, but you're being direct, they're taking it personal on themselves, or they're breaking down emotionally, or so those are not good signs, right? Now, I believe that leaders are built. They're not born, right? So if most of the time they're taking ownership and they're taking that criticism positively, that's a good sign. Now, once in a while, if they take it personal, that's something that you can coach them on, right? One-on-one. But I would say if most of the time they take ownership right from it, then that's a good sign, right? They have that growth mindset and they're getting the feedback the right way. They're being coachable, right? And when was the last time you gave a new hire real feedback in the first 2 weeks? Like, ask that question, like, to yourself. When you gave feedback to a new hire that you recently hired, right? A new team member, and let's say it's been 2 weeks or 4 weeks, how did that team member take it? Did he take it personal? Was he coachable? In our agency, they are in a 3-month probation period. And those are good signs where you can really, really test the waters to make sure that you're seeing these traits that you want to look for in order for you to have a rock star. Trait number 4 is culture fit. And this is one I love, right? See, most agency owners just focus on the skills, right? And that's important. You want to focus on character and skills, but culture keeps them. You see, you want to make sure that the team members you bring in are staying with you long term. And one of the things here in GoStaffy, and I can talk a little bit about our culture, is that we want to teach more about ownership. And we're constantly doing that, right? Through the learning meetings that we do every single Friday. We're constantly doing that whenever we have leadership meetings. We're constantly sprinkling self-development. We're constantly talking about books that we're reading. And that's how you teach ownership. And as you know, leadership is not taught, but it's caught, right? So if the top leaders are not showing the ownership, then don't expect the other team members to follow, right? So make sure that your culture is showing up and making sure they're taking ownership of their own leadership as well. Also, communication. You want to make sure that your culture is always over communicating, even internally. Because if you want them to over communicate with clients, right? Over communication starts within your group, within your team. And we always talk about over communication, right? And if let's say something happens, like the other day, we've been really good with over communicating by email, by text. But the other day, we got a client that emailed us and said, "Hey, we haven't heard from you for a week." And I was like, "What? This can't happen. I mean, this is really very rare, right?" And we found out that there was a error on the automation, right? And we missed it. It was just an error, like something that that happened within the system. And I remember where we had a meeting, and that was a coachable time where we were able to discuss it. And even though part of it was the automation's fault, we took ownership of it. And the person in charge was saying, "Hey, John, you're right. Like, I should have been aware of the automation not working, and I should have over communicated." So it's constantly, when you're building that culture is so important that you're constantly feeding back from each other, having those coachable moments, making sure that things are being spoken about, right? So growth is also important, that you're constantly growing, right? We constantly have, like I said earlier, the learning meetings that happen every single Friday. So having some type of learning meetings is important. And then self-development. I'm a huge like advocate in self-development. Self-development is very important because I believe that if you're not growing, then your team is not going to grow. And the other thing I want to mention about culture is also defining your core values. We have an acronym that we memorize, and everyone knows the core values. And usually the core values can be based on just 4 areas, right? Or four core values. I wouldn't make them complicated. Just have 4 or 5. And I think if your team understands what your core values are, whether let's say is to be proactive, to have integrity, to continuous learning. So whatever your core values are, that's going to feed the culture, right? And you want to make sure that the people that you're hiring fit the core values as well. Your culture is what's going to keep your team member long-term, right? If someone joins your team tomorrow, could they clearly explain your culture in 1 sentence? So it's very important that you define that today, right? And I want to just add this other trait, right, that nobody talks about, right? If there's a 5th one, and I know I spoke about 4, but if there's a 5th trait that I would add, would be hunger. Hunger fits on every single hire that you want to hire. You want to make sure they're hungry for more training, hungry to learn, hungry to attend workshops, hungry to ask questions. They're hungry to improve every single day, right? And that's the same analogy as if you look at all the superstars, right? All the basketball players like Stephen Curry, even Michael Jordan back in the days, they were hungry to get better at the game. And they strive to be better. They practice more than the average person. They were a student of the game. And I think if you want to hire the right people, you want to make sure that they have that hunger element. And you'll see that in the beginning, right? You'll see that by the questions they ask. They're constantly, maybe they stay over. They're not just 9-to-5ers, right? They might stay an extra hour because they want to learn how the process works in your agency. So look for those little touch points, and those are good signs. The people who grow the fastest aren't always the smartest. They're the most hungriest. And those are the ones that are separated from the crowd. Those are the ones that make the difference. Or those are the ones above the average, above what everyone's doing, right? Those are the people that I call rock stars. So I want to leave you with some action items before your next hire. Is you want to make sure that you define your top performer profile. You want to also make sure that you test for communication during interviews. You know what? Like sometimes on purpose, when I'm going to interview someone, on purpose, I'll tell them, "Hey, call me tomorrow at 2:35 p.m. sharp, and I'll be ready," right? Or text me tomorrow at 2:35 p.m. so that we can have the interview. And I'm doing that on purpose to see how good they are to communicate. And if I have someone, then on purpose, when they text message me, I won't respond to them on purpose so that they can follow up to see if they over communicate, to see if they're hungry enough, right? On purpose. And usually the people that follow up with me more than once, more than twice, more than 3 times and say, hey, John, I just emailed you yesterday. Hey, John, I just texted you. Hey, John, I really need this job. I really want this interview. That's a great sign right out of the gates, even before the interview. Number 3 is give feedback by week 2. So once you hire the person, you want to make sure that you give feedback to them and see how they take the feedback. If they take criticism or if they take it personal, that's not a good sign, right? So you want to make sure that you're constantly giving them feedback and be direct with them. Not in a rude way, but you're being direct, right? And number 4 is write your culture in 3 sentences. Define what your core values are so that you can write your culture in 3 sentences. And then ask yourself, would your current hiring process identify someone with these traits? So you want to make sure that you're looking for these traits because this is what's going to allow you to grow to the next level. I really believe what separates a great agency versus a mediocre agency are the great people that you hire and obviously great systems, right? And if you have those 2 ingredients, you're going to be able to scale really fast. So remember, the 2 hires I mentioned at the beginning, they had the same role, the same pay, the same onboarding. The difference was communication, accountability, coachability, culture fit, and hunger. The reality is that building a great agency isn't about finding perfect people. It's about knowing what traits actually matter. Because the agencies that scale aren't built by superheroes. Take that out of your head. It's not built by a unicorn. It's not built by one person. Maybe LeBron James or Michael Jordan is an exception. I'm just playing. It's not built by one person. Even Michael Jordan had Scottie Pippen. Even LeBron James had help. It's never built by one person. They're built by ordinary people, a team who consistently is doing extraordinary things. Guys, that's all I got. If you found value in today's episode, make sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with another agency owner who could benefit from this episode.